Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Not long ago we took a look at Nikon Z50, and during that review we mostly centered our attention on still photography. After that, Nikon released the Zfc, and we also looked at that camera. And again, while that camera was a little bit better for vlogging, we still focused most of our attention on stills. Now though, we have a camera, the Z30, that is designed primarily for vloggers. So I got curious to see how this camera compared to the older Z50. If you guys are more interested in seeing how these cameras do for still photography, definitely check out my Z50 review or my ZFC review. The Z30, we could definitely test it more for still photography in a future video if you guys would like, but for the time being, if you look at the stills from the Z50 and the ZFC, the Z30 is basically going to be essentially the same because all three cameras use the same image sensor. Anyways though, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Z30 and compare it to the Z50. Taking a closer look at both these cameras side by side, it becomes immediately obvious that the Z50 is set up more for still photography, whereas the Z30 is set up more for video. Looking at the top of the Z50, this is the really big giveaway. This camera has an electronic viewfinder. Now, I'm not saying that an electronic viewfinder is something that's just used in still photography. Sometimes videographers may prefer to use one as well, but in most cases, people doing video are going to gravitate more towards the rear screen. Another thing on this camera that is definitely a stills only specification is going to be the pop-up flash. This is certainly something that we would not use in video. If you look at our connections on the side of the camera, you guys will notice that we have a microphone jack here. Pretty standard stuff, really, guys. It's nice to be able to plug in a microphone, obviously, if you're going to do any type of video. We have our micro HDMI port here at the bottom, as well as a USB type connector. Now, this is not a Type-C connector, it is a USB micro connector. It will support USB charging, but unfortunately there's no power delivery here. So if you use this as a power source when you're shooting video, your battery will eventually go dead. As I kind of fumble with these covers, I have to say they're not the best, but they still get the job done. Another aspect of this camera that's definitely more stills oriented is going to be this tilting screen. Typically, we do not see this type of screen on a camera that's more for video. Now, this screen can be configured to where you can actually take it and you can flip it down like this, but it's still really not ideal for video. I'll speak about this a little bit more in a moment. Taking a look at our Z30 though, you can see how it is definitely more configured for video. We don't have any type of EVF on this camera, and we don't have any type of flash. Up in our area where our EVF and flash would be housed, we have a little bit nicer microphone here with our left and right channels visible there. We also have a very large recording button here. So if you're holding the camera more vlog style, it's much easier to be able to still reach this button. So that's a nice touch as well. Now you also notice that whenever I hit that button, we do have the camera recording, and we have a tally lamp here to let us know. So that's also a very nice video touch. All in all, these cameras have pretty much the exact same video specifications. They both do things like 1080p at up to 120 frames a second, as well as 4K up to 30 frames. So you guys can see that right here. We also have in-camera slow motion with both these. So if you wanted to have a 1080p file that's output already, formatted in a slow motion frame rates and everything, you can actually do that. Or if you'd rather, you can just go ahead and film up to 120 frames and then slow it down in post-processing. And as I mentioned, you also have your 4K up to 30. Now, one video difference I did notice between these two cameras is that on the Z30, you actually have a time code option here. This is something that is not present in the Z50. Another thing worth noting in regards to video is that this camera does not really have, well, It does have a video record time limit, but it's not the usual 29-minute and 59-second limit you see on a lot of Nikon cameras. This camera actually can do up to about 2 hours before it actually will stop recording. Whereas on the Z50, we're still limited to 29 minutes and 59 seconds. So that's a really, really big difference if you're going to do a lot of video. Taking a look at some other aspects of the camera, I'd like to show you guys a little bit about how both these cameras vlog. I've done this a little bit with the Z50 in the past, but let's kind of compare both these cameras in regards to vlogging now that we have them both side by side here. Taking a look at the Z50 first, there's an interesting quirk that I kind of noticed. You guys will see right here that whenever I have the camera with the screen just kind of in a standard configuration, you guys can see that we have our audio levels appearing. If I take the screen and face it forward, you guys will know that you'll notice that the screen changes up. Our audio levels actually disappear here. This is something that's kind of interesting. I did not notice this whenever I initially tested the Z50. And by the way, the Z30 does this also. But yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Alright, so taking a look at some vlogging now. The Z50 is definitely not as good of a vlogging machine, but you guys kind of already knew this already. You guys will notice that it's a little bit hard for me to hold this camera. As you guys can see, my fingers are kind of awkwardly placed, and it's super hard to find the record button up here. It's definitely kind of hard. I actually just had to take the camera and hold it at a bit of a different angle to see if I was even recording right now. Because honestly, it's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of hard to even see the little record symbol here on screen whenever you have the camera held in this position. So yeah, kind of a tricky sort of thing to even sort out. Now you guys will notice that we are getting face detection right now. So you guys can see how it is picking up my face in the video mode here. Now Nikon, they made a little bit of a change on this, and we're going to speak about that more in a moment, but you guys can see how this works. Now, all in all, this is not terrible, but yeah, definitely if you do a lot of vlogging, this is not going to be the best camera of the two. Things become even more complicated whenever you go and try to attach any type of little tripod or anything like this. I've got a little Joby Gorilla Pod here, and it is kind of hard to really work with this. Basically, by hard I mean impossible. You can't really put this on the camera without blocking your screen. Now, Nikon, they partnered with SmallRig to make a little adapter, and it's basically a little plate that goes on the bottom of the camera, and it allows you to take your tripod socket and relocate it to just under the battery compartment, and that kind of solves the problem a little bit, but it's one more thing you have to carry around, so it's not quite ideal. Taking a look at things on the Z30, things are already loads better. Notice guys that it is much easier for me to hold onto the camera. I can kind of wedge my thumb in here a bit more easily because of the way the grip is shaped. There's a bit more space in there, and it's much easier for me to reach up and grab that record button. It falls naturally under my index finger, much better here. And also notice that we have the eye detection working in video mode on this camera, so that's also nice as well. But again, we do have the update on the Z50 that has happened, and I'm going to talk to you guys about that a little bit later on. But yeah, this works out much better. Now, I'm not really using the electronic stabilization on either of these cameras. I'm going to move around a little bit so you guys can kind of see what this is like. I'm not a vlogger, I'm not going to pretend to be, but overall I'd say that things are pretty stable. Now, if I were going to do a lot of vlogging with either of these cameras, I would shoot in 1080p 60 frames a second. That's going to give you a much smoother experience, and it's going to actually work out better. I find that for the few vlogs I've done, I've shot in 1080p just because, 4K is kind of overkill, and file sizes became very troublesome whenever I was doing a lot of vlogging of random travel content and things like that. So 1080p 60 is a good balance. You get some nice smooth motion, and you don't get just crazy file sizes if you're doing a lot of content. Right now we are filming in 4K 24p, mostly just so that I can match the 24p footage that's being filmed for the rest of this video. So that's how that works out. But yeah, the optical VR is working very well. We're not using the electronic VR. So basically, it's giving us a really good look here. I don't really use the electronic stabilization on these too much. There is a little bit of a crop there, but it's doing really well with the optical. So that's how that all works out. If we use this now, you guys can see that if we place this on here, this is much better because we do not have to worry about anything blocking our screen. So yeah, now I can get this guy like this, and we can do this, and we don't have any type of issue with our screen being blocked. We don't have to use any type of external accessory to be able to relocate this tripod socket or anything like that. And I'm still able to have my mic up here. So yeah, this is a way better setup for vlogging. Right while I was in the middle of making this video, Nikon introduced a firmware update for the Z50. Version 2.40 gives you the same exact eye autofocus in video that we see on the Z30. So that definitely adds a lot of utility and basically puts the autofocus system on par with the Z30. But thanks to the better body configuration of the Z30 and that lovely flip out screen, the Z30 still proves to be the better vlogging machine. Looking at a few other physical differences between these cameras, you guys will notice that the Z50 has this sort of touch sensitive portion of the screen where you do your zoom in and zoom out in your displays. Honestly, I'm not a fan of this. I much prefer the Z30's layout where you actually have physical buttons. Now, as you guys know, the D3000 and 5000 series DSLRs are gone, and these cameras, being Z30 and Z50, is no accident on Nikon's part, I'm sure. One thing that I like on these cameras compared to their older DSLR counterparts is that you actually have two command dials on both of them. But in some ways, these cameras may not fully replace the 3000 and 5000 series. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Alright guys, so I know I've been saying vlog this and video that, but I did want to give you guys just a quick little idea of how these cameras perform in terms of still photography. It's basically no surprise here, but both of these cameras perform identically. They both use the exact same 20 megapixel sensor, so you guys will see that across a range of ISOs, you guys will pretty much see the same type of image quality. If you guys are curious more about the still photography aspect of things, definitely check out my full review on the Z50. And if you guys are curious about seeing how the Z30 does in terms of stills, perhaps we could make a separate video about that in the future. But yeah, 1600 ISO here. If we go up to our next ISO range, you guys will see that it's pretty much the same thing. I kind of skipped a bunch of ranges here. This is 12,800. Once again, pretty much identical. So yeah, exactly what we would expect. This is a very good image sensor from Nikon, by the way. A variation of this sensor was used in cameras like the D500 and the D7500. And now we see this sensor being used in the Z30, the Z50, as well as the Zfc. I caught a little bit of the flicker of the fluorescent lights, but even at this very insane 25,600 ISO, these cameras basically do the exact same thing. Anyways, guys, if you have more questions, definitely write me in the comments below. I'm always looking for more questions. And you guys may have noticed that I did have the Zfc shown a moment ago. That's another camera that's very comparable to these two. Perhaps we could do a little comparison with that camera in the future as well. I do have a separate video about the Zfc too, so you guys can definitely check out the link in the description or the cards for that. If you guys have any questions, of course, you guys know what to do. Be sure to follow me on social media. I am known as Photog J the Great. Until next time, guys, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off. Right while I was in the middle of making this video, Nikon actually came out with a firmware update for the Z50. Version 2.40 gives the ability to give you cookies and milk and $1 million and all of the chocolate cake you can eat and all the ice cream and a brand new Tesla.